attention to this surveillance footage. Two women walking across an empty dirt lot in the middle of the afternoon. One wearing a pale yellow dress, the other in bright purple pants. They're side by side, casual, like they're just taking a stroll. But look closer. See that maintenance shed in the distance? That utility pole casting a shadow across the rust-colored ground? In less than 3 minutes after this camera captured them, both of these women will vanish without a trace. This grainy footage will become the most important piece of evidence in a case that would shock an entire community. Because what you're looking at right now is the last time anyone saw Victoria and Natalie Brennan alive. You know that moment when you realize something's wrong? Not just off, but deeply, terrifyingly wrong? For Margaret Brennan, that moment came on a Tuesday evening in July when her daughters didn't show up for dinner. Now I know what you're thinking. Adults miss dinner all the time, right? But here's the thing about Victoria and Natalie Brennan. They were creatures of habit. Every Tuesday, without fail, they'd come to their parents' house in Willow Creek, Oregon for family dinner. Had been doing it for years. Victoria, the older sister at 32, would bring her famous apple pie. Natalie, 29, always arrived with fresh flowers from the farmer's market. Margaret checked her phone for the 100th time. No calls, no texts, nothing. "They're probably just running late," her husband Robert said, but there was uncertainty in his voice, because deep down he felt it too, that cold knot of dread forming in his stomach. By 8 o'clock, Margaret was calling both daughters, straight to voicemail. By 9, she was calling their friends. By 10, she and Robert were in their car, driving to Victoria's apartment across town. The apartment was dark. Victoria's car, a silver Honda Civic, wasn't in its usual spot. They drove to Natalie's place next. Same thing. Dark windows, no car, no signs of life. That's when Margaret called the police. "My daughters are missing," she said, her voice shaking. "Both of them. They never miss Tuesday dinner. Never. Something's wrong." The dispatcher's voice was calm, practiced. "How long have they been missing, ma'am?" "Since this afternoon. They were supposed to be here at 6. There was a pause. "Ma'am, adults need to be missing for at least 24 hours before—" "I don't care about your rules." Margaret's composure finally cracked. "My daughters are missing. Both of them. Please, you have to help me." Something in her voice must have resonated, because the dispatcher agreed to send an officer to take a report. Officer David Chen arrived at the Brennan house just after 11 that night. He was young, maybe late 20s, and he listened carefully as Margaret and Robert explained the situation. Victoria and Natalie were close. Best friends, really, despite the 3-year age gap. Victoria worked as a loan officer at Pacific Northwest Credit Union. Steady job, good reputation, never missed a day of work without calling in. Natalie was a freelance graphic designer, creative and free-spirited, but equally reliable when it came to family commitments. Neither woman was married, though Victoria had been in a serious relationship until about 6 months ago. The breakup had been messy, according to Margaret. A man named Trevor Hutchins. He'd taken it badly when Victoria ended things. Officer Chen made a note of that. "Has he been bothering her?" Margaret hesitated. She got a restraining order in February. He kept showing up at her work, sending her messages. Nothing violent, but it scared her enough to take action. That changed things. Chen radioed for a detective. Detective Sarah Morrison arrived at the Brennan household just after midnight. She was a 15-year veteran of the Willow Creek Police Department, specializing in missing persons cases. She'd seen her share of worried parents, and she knew how to separate genuine concern from overreaction. This was genuine concern. "Walk me through their day," Morrison said, settling into the Brennans' living room with her notebook. "Everything you know." Margaret took a shaky breath. "Victoria texted me this morning at 9. Just a normal good morning text. She said she had a busy day at work but was looking forward to dinner. That was the last I heard from her." "And Natalie?" "She called me around 11. She was at the coffee shop downtown, the one on Maple Street where she likes to work. She sounded happy, normal. Said she'd finished a big project for a client and was celebrating with a fancy latte." Margaret's voice broke. "That was the last time I spoke to her. Detective Morrison made notes. Did either of them mention plans for the afternoon? Meeting anyone? Going anywhere specific? Robert spoke up. Victoria mentioned she might stop by the bank branch on 4th Street after work. Something about paperwork. She usually gets off around 5. And Natalie works from home, right? Or coffee shops? Both, Margaret said. She's flexible. Could work anywhere with her laptop. Morrison's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then stood abruptly. Excuse me for a moment. She stepped outside to take the call. When she returned 5 minutes later, her expression was grim. We found Victoria's car, she said quietly. It's parked behind the old Riverside Industrial Complex on the east side of town. Doors locked, no signs of struggle, but there's no sign of Victoria. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. What about Natalie's car? Still looking. The Riverside Industrial Complex had been abandoned for 3 years. The textile factory that once operated there had closed down, leaving behind a sprawling property of empty warehouses and overgrown lots. It wasn't exactly a high-crime area, but it wasn't somewhere you'd expect 2 professional women to be hanging around on a Tuesday afternoon either. Detective Morrison assembled a team. By 2 in the morning, they had officers combing the industrial complex and the surrounding area. By 3, they'd found Natalie's car, a red Toyota Corolla, parked 2 streets over from Victoria's vehicle. Both cars were processed for evidence. No blood, no signs of struggle. Both had been locked. Victoria's purse was in her car, which was strange. Her phone was there too, powered off. Natalie's car told a similar story. Laptop bag in the back seat, phone in the cup holder, also powered off. It's like they just walked away from their lives, Morrison muttered to Officer Chen as dawn began to break over Willow Creek. The real breakthrough came at 6 that morning when Detective Morrison received a call from the Willow Creek Municipal Traffic Division. They'd been reviewing footage from traffic cameras in the area, trying to establish a timeline. Detective, you need to see this, the traffic analyst said. Morrison drove to City Hall, where the traffic monitoring center was located. The analyst, a young woman named Jessica Park, had multiple screens pulled up. This camera is mounted on a utility pole near the industrial complex, Jessica explained, pulling up the footage. It's primarily for monitoring the intersection, but it catches the edge of the vacant lot behind the complex. Morrison leaned forward, watching the grainy black and white footage. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m., July 16th. And there they were, 2 women walking across the empty lot, one in a light-colored dress, the other in dark pants. They were walking side by side, not hurried, not running, just walking, calm, almost casual. That's them, Morrison breathed. That has to be Victoria and Natalie. Jessica nodded grimly. It gets worse. Watch. She let the footage play. The 2 women walked across the lot, heading toward what looked like an old maintenance shed in the distance. And then, as they moved beyond the camera's range, they simply disappeared from view. That's the last footage we have of them, Jessica said. No other cameras in the area. They walk into frame at 2:47, walk out of frame by 2:49, and then nothing. Morrison felt a chill run down her spine. 2 women vanishing in broad daylight, captured on camera walking to their fate. But why were they there? And who were they meeting? She grabbed her radio. This is Detective Morrison. I need a full search team at the Riverside Industrial Complex immediately. Focus on the maintenance structures in the back lots. We have reason to believe this is the last known location of our missing persons. By 8 in the morning, the Riverside Industrial Complex looked like a crime scene from a movie. Yellow tape everywhere, officers searching every inch of the property, K-9 units sniffing through the abandoned buildings. Margaret and Robert Brennan arrived around 9, escorted by a victim's advocate. Morrison met them at the perimeter. We're doing everything we can, she said, though the words felt hollow. I don't understand, Margaret said, tears streaming down her face. Why would they be here? This place has been closed for years. What were they doing here? That was the question everyone was asking. The search teams worked through the morning and into the afternoon. They searched the maintenance shed, the old warehouses, the loading docks. They searched every possible hiding place, every room, every corner. Nothing. No blood, no weapons, no bodies. No Victoria, no Natalie. It was like they'd evaporated into thin air. Detective Morrison stood in the middle of the dirt lot, the same lot where the traffic camera had captured the sisters walking. The ground was hard-packed, rust-colored dirt, baking under the July sun. A few scraggly trees provided minimal shade. The maintenance shed stood about 100 yards away, its door hanging off one hinge. "They were here," Morrison said to Officer Chen, who'd been working alongside her all night. "Right here, walking across this lot." "And then what? Where did they go?" Chen squinted in the bright sunlight. "There are no drag marks, no tire tracks that look fresh. The ground's too hard to leave much evidence anyway. But if someone took them, they had to have had a vehicle nearby." Morrison nodded slowly. "Pull every traffic camera within a 5-mile radius. I want to see every car that came through this area yesterday between 2 and 5 p.m. Someone knows what happened here." While the traffic camera footage was being compiled, Morrison turned her attention to the ex-boyfriend, Trevor Hutchins. She found him at his apartment in downtown Willow Creek at 3 that afternoon. He answered the door in sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, looking like he'd just woken up. "Trevor Hutchins?" Morrison showed her badge. His eyes went wide. "Is this about Victoria? I saw the news. I can't believe. We need to talk. Can I come in?" His apartment was a disaster. Dishes piled in the sink, clothes on the floor, the unmistakable smell of stale beer and regret. Trevor cleared space on a couch that had seen better days. "I had nothing to do with whatever happened to her," he said immediately. "I know we had a rough patch, but I would never hurt Vicky. Never." "Where were you yesterday afternoon between 2 and 5 p.m.? Trevor ran a hand through his greasy hair. "I was at work. I'm a contractor with Riverside Construction. We're working on a renovation project on the north side. I was there all day, didn't leave until 6. "Riverside Construction?" Morrison's ears perked up. "That's interesting. Why? Do you know about the old Riverside Industrial Complex?" Trevor's face paled slightly. "The abandoned factory? Yeah, I know it. The company used to have a contract there before it closed. Why? Is that where... Did something happen there?" Morrison studied him carefully. He seemed genuinely confused, even concerned, but she'd learned long ago that people could be excellent actors. "I'll need the contact information for your supervisor to verify your alibi." Of course. Trevor grabbed his phone, hands shaking slightly as he pulled up the information. After leaving Trevor's apartment, Morrison felt frustrated. His alibi would need to be checked, but her gut told her he wasn't their guy. The restraining order had been about harassment, not violence. Trevor seemed like a man who couldn't let go of a relationship, not someone who'd kidnap or harm his ex-girlfriend. So, if not Trevor, then who? The answer came from an unexpected source. That evening, as Morrison was reviewing witness statements at the station, Officer Chen burst into her office. "Detective, we've got something." The traffic analysis team pulled footage from a camera 3 blocks from the industrial complex. He pulled up a video on his tablet. This footage was from 2:34 p.m., about 15 minutes before the sisters appeared on the other camera. A white pickup truck heading toward the industrial complex. "Can you get a plate?" Morrison asked. "Better than that, look at the logo on the door." Morrison squinted at the screen. There, on the truck's door panel, was a logo. Riverside Construction. "Trevor said he was at work on the north side," Chen said. "But Riverside Construction has multiple crews. We need to find out who was driving that truck." Morrison felt adrenaline surge through her veins. "Get me the company's dispatch records for yesterday. I want to know every driver, every truck, every location, and I want it now." By 10 that night, they had the information. The white pickup truck was assigned to a contractor named Damian Reeves. According to the dispatch records, he was supposed to be working at a residential job site on the north side, same as Trevor Hutchins. But the GPS data from the truck told a different story. At 2:34 p.m., that truck was nowhere near the north side job site. It was 3 blocks from the Riverside Industrial Complex. "Where is Damian Reeves now?" Morrison demanded. The Riverside construction office manager, roused from sleep to answer questions, checked the employee files. He called in sick today, said he had food poisoning. I need his address, now. Damian Reeves lived in a small rental house on the outskirts of Willow Creek. When Morrison, Chen, and 4 other officers arrived just after midnight, the house was dark. They knocked. No answer. Damian Reeves, this is the Willow Creek Police Department. We need to speak with you. Nothing. Morrison made the call. We're going in. The door came down with 2 hits from the battering ram. Officers flooded the house, clearing rooms with practiced efficiency. Clear! 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 The house was empty, but in the bedroom they found something that made Morrison's blood run cold. On Damian Reeves's nightstand was a photograph. Victoria Brennan smiling at the camera. She was wearing the same pale yellow dress she'd been wearing in the traffic camera footage. The discovery of Victoria's photograph in Damian Reeves's bedroom changed everything. This wasn't a random crime. This was personal. Detective Morrison immediately issued a bolo, be on the lookout, for Damian Reeves and his white pickup truck. His photo was sent to every law enforcement agency in Oregon and neighboring states. The local news picked up the story by morning, plastering Damian's face across television screens. Person of interest wanted in connection with the disappearance of Victoria and Natalie Brennan. But who exactly was Damian Reeves, and what was his connection to Victoria? Morrison spent the early morning hours piecing together his background. Damian Reeves, 27 years old, had been working for Riverside Construction for 8 months. Before that, he'd bounced around various construction jobs. No criminal record, no red flags, at least not on paper. But when Morrison started digging deeper, talking to his co-workers and former employers, a different picture emerged. Damian was always a bit intense, said one co-worker, Mike Barnett. Quiet guy, kept to himself mostly, but there was something about him that made you uneasy, you know? Like he was always watching people. Another co-worker mentioned that Damian had seemed fixated on someone for the past few months. He'd take long lunch breaks, said he was running errands. But one time I saw him just sitting in his truck in a parking lot staring at the credit union across the street, Pacific Northwest Credit Union, where Victoria worked. Morrison felt the pieces starting to come together, but the picture they were forming was terrifying. He was stalking her, she said to Chen as they reviewed the evidence. Maybe for months. We need to talk to everyone at Victoria's workplace. By noon, Morrison was at the credit union, speaking with Victoria's supervisor and co-workers. The story that emerged was chilling. Yes, several people had noticed a white pickup truck in the parking lot over the past few months. It would park at the far end, stay for an hour or two, then leave. No one had thought much of it. The parking lot was shared with several businesses. One co-worker, Amanda Chen, remembered something else. About 3 weeks ago, Victoria mentioned a guy had tried to talk to her at the coffee shop. She said he was friendly, but something about him creeped her out. She didn't want to be rude, so she'd chatted for a few minutes, but then she left pretty quickly. Did she describe him? Young guy, dark hair, construction worker type. She said he told her he'd seen her around and wanted to introduce himself. Morrison showed Amanda a photo of Damian Reeves. Amanda's face went pale. That's him. That's the guy. So Damian had approached Victoria. Had she rejected him? Is that what triggered this? Morrison needed to find Damian Reeves before this situation got any worse, if it wasn't already too late. The break came late that afternoon. A gas station attendant in a small town 60 miles east of Willow Creek called in a tip. A man matching Damian's description had purchased gas, snacks, and water. Lots of water. He paid cash, the attendant told the responding officer. Seemed nervous, kept looking around. I recognized him from the news and called as soon as he left. Which direction did he go? East, toward the mountain pass. Morrison felt a knot form in her stomach. East of Willow Creek was largely uninhabited. National forest, old logging roads, abandoned ranger stations. If Damian was heading into that terrain, finding him would be exponentially harder. She assembled a team. Search and rescue was called in. They had K-9 units, helicopters, and officers who knew the backcountry. If Damian was out there, they'd find him. But would they find him in time to save Victoria and Natalie? That was the question haunting everyone. Margaret and Robert Brennan were staying at a hotel near the police station, unable to bear being in their empty house while their daughters were missing. Morrison visited them every few hours with updates. "We're going to find them," Morrison said, though she was no longer sure if she believed it herself. It had been over 24 hours since the sisters had vanished. Statistics on missing persons cases were grim after the first 48 hours. "Why would this man take both of them?" Margaret asked, her voice hoarse from crying. "If he was fixated on Victoria, why Natalie?" It was a good question, one Morrison had been wrestling with herself. Best guess? Natalie was there, wrong place, wrong time. If Damien had some kind of plan to abduct Victoria and Natalie showed up with her, he might have felt he had no choice but to take them both. "But why were they at that abandoned complex in the first place?" Robert asked. "That's what I can't understand. What were my daughters doing there?" Morrison had a theory about that too. "We found deleted text messages on Victoria's phone. Someone had been texting her from a burner number over the past 2 weeks. The texts were friendly at first, someone claiming to have information about a good deal on a used car. Victoria had mentioned to friends she was thinking about trading in her Honda." Margaret's eyes widened. "He lured her there." "That's what we think. The texts suggested meeting at the industrial complex because the seller had a friend who owned property nearby, could store the car there. It was supposed to be a quick meeting just to see the car." "And Natalie?" Margaret whispered. "The texts show Victoria telling this person she'd bring her sister for safety. Smart move, normally. But in this case..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Meanwhile, the search teams were combing the forests east of Willow Creek. Helicopters with thermal imaging flew grid patterns over the dense trees. K-9 units followed scent trails that seemed to lead nowhere. On the second night after the disappearance, they found Damien's truck. It was abandoned on an old logging road, tucked behind a stand of pine trees. The truck was empty, but forensic teams immediately began processing it. What they found inside made Morrison's worst fears seem confirmed. 2 sets of zip-tie restraints, cut and discarded on the floor of the truck bed. Traces of blood on the metal, not much, but enough to test. Hair fibers that preliminary analysis suggested belonged to 2 different women. "They were in this truck," the forensic tech told Morrison. "Restrained, possibly injured, but they're not here now." "So where are they?" That question would take 3 more agonizing days to answer. The blood found in the truck came back as a match to Victoria Brennan. The hair fibers matched both sisters. Damien Reeves had definitely had them, at least for a time. But the logging road where his truck was found branched off in a dozen different directions, leading to thousands of acres of wilderness. Search teams worked around the clock. Margaret and Robert Brennan stayed at the hotel, waiting, praying, hoping. The media coverage was intense. Local news, then regional, then national. 2 sisters vanished in broad daylight, captured on camera walking to their doom. Everyone in Willow Creek was following the case. Volunteers joined the search efforts. People left flowers at the industrial complex where the sisters were last seen. Candlelight vigils were held, but still no sign of Victoria and Natalie. The investigation expanded beyond just finding the sisters. Morrison wanted to understand Damien Reeves completely. His background, his patterns, his psychology. What they discovered was deeply unsettling. Damien had no close friends, no real social connections. His apartment, when forensic teams processed it more thoroughly, revealed a man living in isolation. Takeout containers piled up, unwashed clothes, and most disturbingly, a collection of photographs and printed social media posts about Victoria. He'd been following her online for at least a year, saving pictures, printing posts she'd made about visiting her favorite coffee shop or going to farmers markets with her sister. He'd created an entire mental narrative about Victoria's life, inserting himself into it. "This is textbook stalking escalation," said Dr. Patricia Reynolds, a forensic psychologist consulted on the case. He started with passive observation, following her online, watching her at work. Then he moved to proximity seeking, going to places he knew she'd be. The coffee shop encounter was his attempt at initiating contact. When that didn't go well, he couldn't handle the rejection, so he escalated to control. The kidnapping, Morrison said. Exactly. In his mind, if he could just have time with her, control the narrative, she'd see him the way he wanted to be seen. The tragedy is that Natalie became collateral damage in his fantasy. The psychological profile helped Morrison understand who they were dealing with, but it didn't help them find where Damien had taken the sisters. On the 5th day, a hiker found something. An old ranger station, abandoned for decades, deep in the national forest. The door was slightly ajar, which was unusual. These old stations were usually locked up tight or completely boarded over. The hiker approached cautiously. "Hello?" No response. She pushed the door open wider and immediately recoiled from the smell. Not death, thank God, but the smell of human habitation. Sweat, fear, unwashed bodies. She pulled out her cell phone. No signal this deep in the forest. She ran back to the trail, back towards civilization, until she got a single bar of service. 911, what's your emergency? I found something. The old ranger station on the Morrison Creek Trail. I think someone's been staying there. I think it might be related to those missing girls. Within an hour, law enforcement descended on the ranger station. Detective Morrison was in the first wave of responders. The station was a single room, maybe 15 feet by 15 feet, with boarded windows and a dirt floor. In the corner was a pile of supplies, bottles of water, granola bars, protein bars, the kind of food you could buy at a gas station, and huddled against the far wall, alive but clearly traumatized, were Victoria and Natalie Brennan. "We've got them!" Morrison shouted into her radio. "We've got them! They're alive!" The sisters were immediately wrapped in emergency blankets and assessed by paramedics who'd hiked in with the rescue team. They were dehydrated, exhausted, and terrified, but physically they seemed relatively unharmed. "Are you hurt?" Morrison asked gently. "Do you need immediate medical attention?" Victoria shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Natalie was too shocked to speak, just clutching her sister's hand. "It's over," Morrison said. "You're safe now. We've got you." As the sisters were carefully led out of the ranger station and toward the waiting rescue helicopters, Morrison looked around the small structure. Damien had kept them here, imprisoned but alive. But where was he? The answer came quickly. A team of officers searching the surrounding area found fresh footprints leading away from the ranger station. The tracks led northeast, deeper into the forest. "He knows we're here," one officer said. "He must have heard the helicopters." Morrison made a decision. "Get the sisters to safety first, then we go after him." With Victoria and Natalie Brennan safely evacuated and on their way to the hospital, the manhunt for Damien Reeves intensified. He was out there, somewhere in the vast wilderness, and he knew they were coming. Search teams fanned out from the ranger station, following the footprints and tracking dogs. The terrain was brutal. Thick underbrush, steep ravines, dense forest that blocked out most of the sunlight even at midday. Damien had a head start, but he was also on foot with limited supplies. The search teams had vehicles, helicopters, trained personnel, and determination. They found him 18 hours later. He was hiding in a small cave formation, exhausted and out of water. When K-9 units approached, he didn't run. He just sat there, hands raised, defeated. "Don't shoot," he said quietly. "I give up." Officers moved in, weapons drawn. Damien was handcuffed, read his rights, and led back toward the command post. He was dirty, scratched up from pushing through underbrush, and looked like he hadn't slept in days. Detective Morrison watched as he was loaded into a police vehicle. She felt relief, anger, and a burning need for answers. Why had he done this? Back at the Willow Creek police station, after Damien had been processed and given access to a lawyer, Morrison finally got her chance to ask. Damien sat across from her in the interrogation room, his lawyer beside him, a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I want to explain," Damien said before Morrison could even start. "I want people to understand." His lawyer started to object, but Damien held up a hand. "No, I need to say this." Morrison leaned forward. "Then say it." Damien's story was disturbing in its banality. He'd first seen Victoria at the credit union months ago when he'd gone in to set up a checking account. He'd been immediately attracted to her, thought she was beautiful, kind. He'd started finding excuses to go back to the credit union. Then he'd started parking in the lot just to see her come and go. "I know how that sounds," he said. "I know it was wrong, but I convinced myself I was just getting to know her from a distance, working up the courage to talk to her." "You did talk to her," Morrison said coldly, "at a coffee shop. She told her coworkers you creeped her out." Damien flinched. "I didn't mean to scare her, I just wanted to introduce myself. But when I saw her reaction, when I realized she was uncomfortable, I felt rejected, humiliated." "So you decided to kidnap her?" "No, not at first. I went home that day and I tried to forget about her, I really did. But I couldn't stop thinking about her. And then I had this idea. I'd create a situation where we could meet again, but this time she wouldn't know it was me. The fake car sale, meeting at the industrial complex. And when she brought her sister?" Damien's face crumpled. "That wasn't supposed to happen. I panicked. I thought if I let Natalie go, she'd call the police immediately. So I took them both. Drove them to my truck, used zip ties I had for work. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just reacted. You held them prisoner for 5 days. I didn't know what to do. I never meant for any of this to happen. I kept them in that ranger station because I needed time to think. I brought them food and water. I didn't hurt them. I swear I didn't hurt them." Morrison felt disgust rising in her throat. "You terrorized 2 innocent women because one of them rejected your advances at a coffee shop. Do you understand how insane that is?" Damien's lawyer intervened. "Detective, my client is cooperating fully. Your client kidnapped 2 women and held them against their will for 5 days. He needs to cooperate fully." Over the next several hours, Damien provided details that helped investigators piece together the complete timeline. He'd sent the texts about the car sale from a burner phone purchased with cash. He'd driven his work truck to the industrial complex, positioning himself in the maintenance shed where he could see anyone approaching. When Victoria and Natalie arrived at 2:47 p.m., captured on that traffic camera, Damien had waited until they were close to the shed. Then he'd emerged, pointed a knife at them, and forced them into his truck. The whole abduction took less than 3 minutes. He'd zip-tied their hands, covered them with a tarp in the truck bed, and driven out of the area before anyone could spot them. He'd headed east into the mountains to the ranger station he'd discovered during a solo hiking trip months earlier. "I thought if I just had time with Victoria, she'd understand that I wasn't a bad guy," Damien said, his delusion still evident even as he sat in handcuffs. "I thought maybe she'd see that we could have something." "And Natalie?" Morrison asked. "What were you planning to do with her?" Damien didn't have an answer for that. The investigation also revealed how close they'd come to missing crucial evidence. The traffic camera footage that captured the sisters walking across that dirt lot? That footage was scheduled to be automatically deleted after 7 days as part of the city's data management protocol. Jessica Park, the traffic analyst, had pulled it on day 2 of the investigation. If they'd waited any longer, that crucial evidence would have been gone forever. "That footage changed everything," Morrison later told reporters. "It confirmed our timeline, showed us where to focus our search, and ultimately helped us understand how this abduction occurred. Without it, we might have been looking in completely different directions." The footage also revealed something else during enhanced analysis. In the far corner of the frame, barely visible, was the white pickup truck. The tech team had to zoom in significantly to see it, but it was there, parked behind the maintenance shed, exactly where Damien said he'd positioned it. "When we went back and looked at that surveillance footage frame by frame," Jessica Park explained, "we could see the truck's position. It was strategic. He parked where he couldn't be seen from the road, but where he had a clear view of anyone approaching the shed. He'd thought this through." Victoria and Natalie's testimony corroborated every detail. They described the terrifying moment when Damien emerged from the shed, the knife in his hand. They described the truck ride, unable to see where they were going, terrified they were being driven to their deaths. They described 5 days in that dark ranger station, Damien visiting periodically to bring food and water, but never speaking much, never explaining what he planned to do with them. "We thought every visit might be the last," Victoria told Morrison during her official statement. "We thought he was working up to finishing what he started. We held each other and prayed and tried to stay strong. Why didn't he?" Morrison hesitated, not wanting to traumatize Victoria further. But Victoria understood the question. "I don't think he knew what he wanted. He'd tell me I was beautiful, that he just wanted to get to know me. But then he'd leave, and we'd be alone again in the dark. It was like he'd created this situation without thinking about how it would end." Natalie added her own perspective. "I kept trying to talk to him when he'd visit, asking him to let us go, telling him he could still walk away from this. But it was like talking to a wall. He'd just stare at Victoria, completely ignoring me." The psychological evaluation of Damien Reeves would later reveal a dangerous combination of obsessive fixation, poor impulse control, and an inability to process rejection. He'd built up an entire fantasy relationship with Victoria in his mind, based on nothing more than seeing her at work and one brief coffee shop encounter. When reality didn't match his fantasy, he'd tried to force it to. The physical evidence collected from the ranger station, Damien's truck, and the industrial complex was overwhelming. In addition to the zip ties and blood evidence, forensic teams found the burner phone Damien had used to text Victoria, hidden in his truck's glove compartment, the knife he'd used to threaten the sisters, recovered from his backpack when he was arrested, photographs of Victoria on his personal phone, clearly taken without her knowledge over several months, text conversations with co-workers where Damien had asked questions about Victoria's schedule and habits disguised as casual interest. Perhaps most damning was Damien's own GPS data. His phone had been with him during the entire ordeal, and the location data created a perfect timeline of the crime. From the industrial complex to the logging road to the ranger station, every movement documented. He thought he was being smart, using a burner phone for the texts, Officer Chen observed, but he forgot about his own phone tracking his every move. The case against Damien Reeves was airtight. During the weeks following the sisters' rescue, more details emerged about their captivity. Victoria and Natalie had been kept in almost complete darkness, the boarded windows of the ranger station letting in only thin slivers of light. They'd had no idea if it was day or night, no sense of how much time had passed. "The not knowing was almost worse than anything else," Natalie later recounted. "We didn't know if anyone was looking for us. We didn't know if our parents even knew we were missing. We didn't know if we'd ever get out of there." The sisters had stayed strong for each other, taking turns keeping watch when one needed to sleep, whispering encouragement when despair threatened to overwhelm them. They'd made a pact that first night. If only one of them had a chance to escape, she would take it and get help for the other. "We were not going to let him win," Victoria said firmly. "Whatever he wanted from us, whatever twisted fantasy he'd created, we weren't going to play along. We were going to survive." And survive they did, largely because of their bond and their refusal to give up hope. The community response to their ordeal was overwhelming. When Victoria and Natalie were released from the hospital after 2 days of observation, they were greeted by hundreds of yellow ribbons tied around trees and lampposts throughout Willow Creek, the color of the dress Victoria had been wearing when she was taken. A fund was established to help cover their medical expenses and counseling costs. Local businesses donated thousands of dollars. The credit union where Victoria worked held a welcome-back celebration, though she wasn't ready to return to work yet. The Brennan family held a press conference a week after the rescue. Margaret and Robert stood flanked by their daughters, all four holding hands. "We want to thank everyone who helped bring our girls home," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "The police, the search teams, the volunteers, the community, you didn't give up on them, and we'll never forget that." Victoria stepped forward to speak. "When Natalie and I were in that ranger station, scared and alone, we talked about this moment. We talked about being able to stand here together, safe. There were times we didn't think it would happen, but it did, and we're going to make the most of this second chance." The trial of Damien Reeves began 9 months after the kidnapping. The prosecution had a mountain of evidence, cooperative victims willing to testify, and a defendant who'd already confessed to most of the crimes. Damien's defense attorney tried to argue for lesser charges, suggesting his client had mental health issues that impaired his judgment. A psychologist testified that Damien showed signs of erotomania, a delusional disorder where someone believes another person is in love with them. But the prosecution's case was too strong. The premeditation was clear. The burner phone, the fake car sale setup, the remote location he'd scouted in advance. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a calculated abduction. The prosecution methodically walked the jury through every piece of evidence. They showed the surveillance footage of Victoria and Natalie walking across that dirt lot, pointed out the barely visible white truck in the enhanced images. They presented the GPS data tracking Damien's movements. They displayed the photographs found in his apartment, the printed social media posts, the evidence of months of stalking. Expert witnesses testified about the psychological impact of kidnapping and false imprisonment. Medical professionals detailed the sisters' conditions when they were found: severe dehydration, malnutrition, psychological trauma. But the most powerful testimony came from Victoria and Natalie themselves. Victoria took the stand wearing a navy blue suit, her hair pulled back, her voice steady despite visible tension. She described seeing Damien at the coffee shop, how something about his intensity had frightened her. She described receiving the texts about the car, thinking it was a legitimate sale. She described the moment he emerged from that shed with a knife. "I knew immediately we'd made a terrible mistake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I knew we'd walked into a trap, and all I could think was that I'd brought my sister into danger because I wanted backup for what should have been a simple car purchase." Natalie's testimony was equally powerful. She described 5 days of not knowing if they'd live or die, of trying to keep Victoria's spirits up while fighting her own terror, of the moment she heard helicopters overhead and dared to hope. "I kept thinking about my parents," Natalie said, tears streaming down her face, "about how they must have been going crazy not knowing where we were. I thought about all the things I hadn't said to people I loved, all the experiences I might never have. And I thought about my sister, who I'd tried to protect, but who ended up protecting me just as much." The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of people crying. When it came time for Damien to testify in his own defense, his lawyer advised against it. But Damien insisted. He wanted to explain himself one more time. It went exactly as badly as everyone expected. Damien claimed he never intended to hurt anyone, that he just wanted a chance to talk to Victoria in a setting where she couldn't run away. He claimed he was planning to let them go once Victoria understood how much he cared about her. The prosecution tore his testimony apart. "You held them prisoner for 5 days. What were you waiting for? Victoria to fall in love with her kidnapper? You brought a knife. You restrained them with zip ties. You hid them in a remote location. These aren't the actions of someone who just wants to talk. You traumatized 2 innocent women, devastated their family, and mobilized an entire community's resources in a search effort. And you claim you meant no harm?" The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Damien Reeves was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree kidnapping, 2 counts of unlawful imprisonment, 2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon, and 1 count of stalking. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison, without the possibility of parole. As the judge read the sentence, Damien showed emotion for the first time throughout the trial. He cried, apologized, said he never meant to hurt anyone. But Victoria and Natalie, sitting in the courtroom with their parents, showed no sympathy. "He stole 5 days of our lives," Victoria said in her victim impact statement. 5 days where we thought every moment might be our last. 5 days where we couldn't hug our parents, couldn't feel safe, couldn't be free. He didn't just kidnap our bodies. He tried to kidnap our futures, our sense of safety, our ability to trust. That's something I'll be working to reclaim for the rest of my life." Natalie spoke too, her voice stronger than anyone expected. "I was taken because I was trying to protect my sister, because I didn't want her to meet a stranger alone. And now I live with the knowledge that my presence, which was supposed to keep her safe, almost got us both killed. That's not my fault. That's all on him. But it's something I think about every day." She paused, looking directly at Damien. "You wanted Victoria to see you as a good person. You wanted her to understand you. But all you've shown us is that you're someone who thinks his wants matter more than our safety, our freedom, our lives. I hope you spend every day of your sentence thinking about what you took from us and what you threw away about your own life." Margaret Brennan spoke to reporters outside the courthouse after the sentencing. "We got our daughters back. Not every family in this situation can say that. We're grateful, but we're also changed forever. This experience taught us how quickly everything can be taken away and how important it is to cherish every moment with the people you love." The impact of the case extended far beyond the Brennan family. The Willow Creek Police Department implemented new protocols for reviewing surveillance footage in missing persons cases, ensuring that crucial evidence like the traffic camera footage would be preserved immediately rather than relying on standard deletion schedules. If we'd waited even 2 more days to pull that footage, it would have been automatically deleted, Jessica Park explained at a law enforcement conference where she presented the case. "We got lucky. Other departments shouldn't have to rely on luck." Detective Sarah Morrison received a commendation for her work on the case, but she says the real heroes were Victoria and Natalie themselves. "They survived," Morrison reflected in an interview a year after the trial. "Not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically. They chose not to let this define them. That takes a kind of courage most people never have to summon." The Brennan sisters both underwent extensive therapy after their ordeal. Victoria eventually returned to work at the credit union, though she moved to a different branch farther from the industrial complex. She also began working with the Human Resources Department to develop better safety protocols for employees who might be dealing with stalkers or unwanted attention. Natalie continued her graphic design work, but became an advocate for stalking victims, speaking at schools and community centers about the warning signs of dangerous obsession. She partnered with local law enforcement to create educational materials about personal safety and the importance of reporting suspicious behavior. "People sometimes dismiss stalking as just someone being persistent or romantic," Natalie said in one of her presentations. "But there's a line between showing interest and showing obsession. When someone can't accept no for an answer, when they start showing up in places they shouldn't be, when they make you uncomfortable, that's not romance. That's danger. And you have every right to protect yourself, even if it means being rude or hurting someone's feelings." The sisters created a foundation called Second Sunrise, dedicated to supporting survivors of kidnapping and false imprisonment. The name came from something Natalie had said to Victoria during their captivity. "We're going to see another sunrise. I promise you we will." Through the foundation, they've helped dozens of survivors access therapy, legal resources, and support groups. They've lobbied for better stalking laws and more resources for victims of obsessive behavior. They've turned their trauma into a force for positive change. The old ranger station where the sisters were held has been permanently sealed off by the Forest Service, with a plaque installed nearby dedicating the trail to all survivors of violence. The industrial complex where they were captured on camera has been purchased by a developer and is being transformed into a mixed-use space. The maintenance shed where Damien hid was demolished, but for Victoria and Natalie Brennan, the memories remain. Every Tuesday, they still have dinner with their parents, a tradition that took on new meaning after their ordeal. They've added a new tradition too. Every July 16th, the anniversary of their kidnapping and survival, they take a private moment together to reflect on what they've been through and how far they've come. "People ask me if I'm angry," Victoria said in a recent interview. "And yes, I'm angry. I'm angry that a stranger felt entitled to my attention, my time, my life. I'm angry that his delusion almost cost me and my sister everything. But I refuse to let that anger consume me. I refuse to let him take anything else from me." Natalie added, "We were victims for 5 days. We're survivors for the rest of our lives. That's the perspective I try to hold on to." The case of Victoria and Natalie Brennan serves as a sobering reminder about the dangers of stalking. the importance of trusting your instincts when someone makes you uncomfortable, and the crucial role that technology, like that traffic camera footage, can play in solving crimes and bringing perpetrators to justice. It also highlights the resilience of the human spirit. Two sisters bound by blood and love who refused to give up on each other even in the darkest moments, who found strength in each other when they had nothing else, who survived not just their ordeal, but its aftermath, choosing to build lives full of meaning and purpose. Today, Victoria is engaged to be married to a man she met through mutual friends 2 years after her ordeal. He knows her story, respects her journey, and loves her not despite her trauma, but including it as a part of what makes her who she is. Natalie has launched a successful graphic design business specializing in materials for nonprofit organizations, particularly those focused on victims' rights. Both sisters continue their Tuesday dinners with their parents, grateful for second chances and the unbreakable bond between them. The surveillance footage that captured them walking across that dirt lot, two women in the middle of an ordinary day heading unknowingly toward terror, has become a teaching tool for law enforcement agencies across the country. It's a reminder that sometimes the most important evidence is captured in the most unexpected places, and that technology, when used properly, can be the difference between a case solved and one that goes cold. For the Brennan family, that footage represents both the worst and best of what technology can do. It documented the moment their daughters were taken, but it also provided the crucial evidence that helped bring them home. "When I watch that footage now," Margaret Brennan said, "I see two young women who don't know what's about to happen to them. I see the last moments of their innocence, their sense of safety. But I also see two women who would survive, two women who would fight, two women who would come home to us, and that's what I choose to focus on." In a case that could have ended in unimaginable tragedy, the Brennan sisters walked out of that dark ranger station alive, ready to reclaim their lives from someone who thought he could take them away. Their story is one of survival, resilience, and the fierce love between sisters who refuse to give up on each other, even in the darkest moments. Victoria and Natalie Brennan are survivors, and they want other potential victims to know: trust your instincts, report suspicious behavior, and never stop fighting. Because sometimes, against all odds, you get a second sunrise.